Sophia's morning was a whirlwind of chaos and comedy. The alarm blared, jolting her awake with a start. She groaned and smacked the snooze button. But the silence lasted all of 3 seconds before Finn and Quinn burst into her room, leaping onto the bed like caffeinated kangaroos. "Mum! Mum, Mum!" Finn shouted, bouncing up and down. "What?" Sophia groaned, trying to rub the sleep from her eyes. "We can't find the cereal," Quinn added, her voice muffled by the pillow she had commandeered. Sophia sighed and dragged herself out of bed. "Okay, let's find the cereal." She shuffled to the kitchen, where the cereal box was inexplicably perched on top of the refrigerator, a place it had no business being. "How did it even get up there?" she muttered, grabbing a chair to retrieve it. "Cereal crisis averted," she announced, pouring bowls for the twins. But no sooner had she sat down to sip her coffee than Finn called out, "Mum, I can't find my shoes." "They're by the front door, Finn," she replied, attempting to enjoy at least one hot sip of coffee. "No, they're not," Finn insisted, his voice reaching that perilous pitch that foretold an impending meltdown. With a resigned sigh, Sophia got up and joined the shoe hunt. They finally found them, one under the couch and the other inexplicably inside the dog's bed. The dog, lying innocently beside it, gave her a look that said, "Don't blame me for this." "Quinn, where's your backpack?" Sophia asked, noting the time ticking away. Quinn looked up from her cereal, milk dripping from her chin. "I think it's in the treehouse." "The treehouse?" Sophia echoed incredulously. "Why on earth is it in the treehouse?" "I was playing school with my dolls," Quinn explained, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. Out the door they went, Sophia still in her pajamas and slippers, to retrieve the backpack from the treehouse. By the time they got back inside, the cereal had turned to mush, and so had her patience. "Mum, can you help me with my hair?" Quinn tugged at her sleeve, holding up a tangled mass of hair. "Tie some brushes." "In a second, Quinn," Sophia said, now juggling ironing her blouse, making sandwiches, and hunting for a clean pair of socks. The iron beeped, signaling it was ready, just as the toaster popped, sending toast flying through the air. She caught one slice mid-flight, but the other landed butter side down on the floor. "Of course. 5-second rule," she muttered, picking it up and placing it on the counter with an air of triumph. With the twins finally dressed, fed and armed with all necessary school gear, Sophia herded them towards the door. "Mom, where's your coffee?" Finn asked. Sophia looked down at the counter where her now cold coffee sat, untouched. "Mommy doesn't need coffee." "Mommy needs a miracle," she said, more to herself than to them. They raced to the school bus just in time, and as it pulled away, Sophia waved with a mix of relief and exhaustion. She glanced at the clock. 20 minutes to get ready for her meeting with Grayson. The president of Key Ventures Enterprise was not someone you wanted to be late for. She bolted back inside, stripping off her pajamas as she ran. She jumped into the shower, emerging 2 minutes later, dripping and clutching a towel like a superhero cape. With one hand, she blow-dried her hair while applying mascara with the other, a feat of coordination that would have impressed a circus performer. Dressed and more or less presentable, she grabbed her bag and the necessary documents, only to trip over the dog, who had decided to lie directly in her path. She stumbled but regained her balance, looking down at the dog with a mix of affection and exasperation. "You're lucky you're cute," she muttered. Finally out the door, she realized she had left her keys inside. After a brief but frantic search, she found them in the fridge. Why were they in the fridge? No time to ponder that mystery. As she hurried to her car, she took a deep breath. Despite the chaos, she felt a wave of determination. Today might have started in a tornado of cereal, shoes, and treehouse expeditions. But she was ready to face anything, including the meeting with Grayson. Sophia's morning continued to spiral out of control. After getting the twins off to school, she bolted to her car, hoping to make up for lost time. The city's morning traffic, however, had other plans. As she merged onto the highway, a sea of brake lights greeted her. She groaned, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Come on, move," she muttered, her frustration mounting. A car suddenly cut in front of her, forcing her to slam on the brakes. "Are you kidding me?" she shouted, honking her horn. The driver responded with a nonchalant wave, only aggravating her more. "Learn to drive," she yelled, even though she knew they couldn't hear her. Another car veered into her lane without signaling. Sophia's patience was wearing thin. "Use your blinker, genius," she snapped, her voice filled with irritation. The clock on the dashboard ticked ominously closer to her meeting time. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "Just get through this," she whispered, maneuvering through the traffic as quickly and safely as possible. By the time she pulled into the parking lot of her office building, she was 10 minutes late. She sprinted across the lobby, her heels clicking loudly against the marble floor. The receptionist, Lisa, looked up from her desk with a sympathetic smile. "Good morning, Miss Maxwell. Mr. Grayson is waiting for you in the conference room." Sophia's heart sank. "Thanks, Lisa," she said, hurrying down the hallway. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks as she approached the conference room door. Bursting through the door, she blurted out, "I'm so sorry for being late." Mr. Grayson was facing the window, his back to her. Slowly he turned around with a smirk, his gaze locking onto hers. "Finally, I meet the well-known and sophisticated Sophia Maxwell," he said, his tone dripping with amusement. Sophia's jaw dropped. She stood there, momentarily speechless, as the weight of the moment settled in. The conference room was filled with the quiet hum of people shifting in their seats, their eyes darting between her and Grayson. She took a deep breath, collecting herself. "Yes, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Grayson," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Shall we get started?" he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Sophia nodded, moving to her place at the table. As she settled in, Sophia was dumbfounded when she saw Grayson. It was as if she were looking at Finn himself. Her mind raced back to years ago, to a time she had nearly forgotten, a time she had tried to bury deep within her memory. Could it be? Could he be the one? The father of her kids? Impossible. No, this can't be, she told herself. The room seemed to close in around her as fragments of that night flashed through her mind. Grayson's smirk faded as he noticed her expression. "Miss Maxwell, are you all right?" Sophia snapped back to the present, her heart pounding. "Yes, I'm fine," she replied, trying to regain her composure. She couldn't afford to let her emotions show, not now. "Shall we get started?" he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. She nodded and moved to her place at the table. As she settled in, her mind continued to whirl. The resemblance was uncanny, but she needed to focus. She couldn't let her past disrupt the present. She had worked too hard to get here. With a deep breath, she pushed the thoughts aside and opened her folder, ready to dive into the meeting. Despite the chaos of the morning and the unexpected shock of seeing Grayson, she just wanted to take her emotions out of her head and focus on business. But yet, Sophia's emotions were a tempest. As Grayson began outlining the merger details, she tried to concentrate on his words, but her mind kept drifting. The shape of his jaw, the curve of his lips, the intensity in his eyes. It was like looking at an older version of Finn. Her heart ached with a confusing mix of fear and hope. She couldn't ignore the possibility that Grayson might be the man from that night, the father of her children. She recalled the blurry memory of a night filled with laughter and an electric connection. She had been in a foreign city, letting loose after a particularly grueling conference. They had met at a rooftop bar, the city lights twinkling around them, casting a magical glow over everything. They talked for hours, shared stories, and eventually, one thing led to another. She had never seen him again after that night, and when she discovered she was pregnant, she had resigned herself to raising the twins alone.